Hi, I'm Lee Troop, three-time Olympian, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
Phelps with 10 meters left. 3 minutes to run. The crowd roaring. Freeman wins gold.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome to another episode of the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Gold Coast Marathon and also Pogo Physio. I trust you've been having a great week, and I hope that you've been enjoying pursuing your physical best performance. On today's show, I share a conversation with you that I had with Lee Troop, or Troopy as he's so affectionately known amongst the distance running community around the world. Lee shares with us the highs, the lows, and the learnings of his remarkable distance running career to date. Lee has been an Australian Olympic representative 3 times in the marathon at the 2000 Olympics, 2004, and 2008 Beijing Olympic Games. Lee takes us through the preparation, the racing, and the wash-up of what, in Lee's view, were 3 disappointing Olympic outings and all the learnings that he took in retrospect from each of those Olympic Games campaigns. Lee broke Ron Clarke's 33-year-old national record in the 5,000 metres in 1999, running a blistering quick 13:14:82. 1 year later, Lee turned his energies and attention to the marathon. And Lee takes us through those formative years, breaking that record. Significant voices and mentors that Lee had in his camp, including the legendary Steve Moneghetti, previous guest of the Physical Performance Show. Lee's running PBs are remarkable. 10,000 metres, 27:51, set in 2003. 10 kilometres on the road, 28:51. The half marathon 101 flat set in Tokyo in 1999, and the marathon 209:49 set in Japan in 2003. Lee then went on to run a 2:17 marathon at the age of 40 years. We touch on that today. Lee lays down a physical challenge for the week. However, we didn't get through a performance round on this episode. Lee mentions towards the end of the time with our conversation that he was off to a memorial for one of his young runners who tragically took his life from the Boulder Track Club. So Lee very candidly shares around that and how he has been processing that. So I want to personally acknowledge Lee's commitment in keeping what was a pre-organised time to record this episode amongst what then ended up being some very difficult days for himself as Boulder Track Club head coach and also founder. It really does speak to the character of Lee and in keeping commitments that he's made. So a big shout out to Lee. Shout out to all the Boulder Track Club runners and community members around John Gray's recent passing. And we'll tag up in the show notes today a memorial fundraising GoFundMe campaign that the Boulder Track Club has been organising on behalf of John Gray. So jump over, check that out. But for now, let's jump in with Lee Troop on the highs, lows and learnings of his remarkable career. Listeners, I've been looking forward to today's conversation for some time, and I've got the privilege and the honour of catching up with one of Australia's distance running icons, and that's Lee Troopy Troop. So, Lee, you're in Boulder, Colorado at the moment. I'm here on the Gold Coast, Australia. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it, and thanks for the introduction.
Lee, in terms of something fun, let's start with it. One thing that scares Lee Troop. What's something that scares you, Lee?
Something that scares me. Probably the unknown. For me, people that know me know I'm a control freak, and I like to be in control of things, and I like to organise things, and I never ask for help. And if I'm put in a situation that other people decide they want to hop in and help out with, it worries and scares me. So it's probably the unknown.
Where does that sort of stem from? Is that something that you had growing up? You just liked to have that degree of control, or what do you think is the underlying driver?
I'm not sure. I think, probably being younger, when you are in, say, team sports, or you're relying on people and they let you down, you end up having to, pick up the slack and work yourself. So probably somewhere along the lines, being dependent on people that let you down and don't fulfill their end of the bargain is probably the driving force of, where I want to do it. And if I'm going to do it, I put in 110%. And if it fails, at least it fails on my terms, and I take full accountability and responsibility as opposed to looking for other people to blame. So probably, running being an individual sport as well, you learn that, a lot of it is dependent on you. And if you're relying on other people and things don't go your way, then it's a deep process of trying to work out who should be taking blame.
And do you think that's one of the attractions? I mean, you had a 25-year professional running career, of which we'll cover some of the highlights today. But do you think that was one of the attractions for you, Lee, the fact that you're getting what you get out typically what you put in? I know there's been instances such as some of your Olympic campaigns where your performance didn't live up to your potential that you expected of yourself. But is that one of the attractions? It's really a pure pursuit, isn't it, typically?
I played team sports when I was younger, and running was just the sport that I seemed to fall in love with. And it was, again, you are accountable for everything that you do. Looking back on my career now, I can certainly say that it's not really individual. You've got to get out there and train, but, you have coaches and you have training partners, you have medical practitioners, you have masseuses, you have sponsors. You do end up building a bit of a team of people, but I think the team of people that you end up having involved with you are people that you just completely trust and know that they have your back. And I've always said that, like when I went out and raced, it was like going to war. And, you want to make sure that if you fall over, there's someone there to pick you up. And, they don't have to jump in with you, but they just got to throw you back into it again. So, running was certainly that attraction of where if I was running at 8 o'clock, if people said they were going to be there and it was 8:02, I was already gone. I certainly didn't, wait till 8:15, 8:30 for people. My theory was that, if you were serious about what you wanted to do and you set a time, you should be there. So I think, that as an athlete transitioned well into being a coach, and particularly with the group of athletes that I have, because the rules that I put in place for myself are the rules that I have in place for my whole team. I was self-coached for a long time, and I did a lot of training on my own, and I was always motivated knowing that the Kenyans were getting up in the morning and training, and were training at lunchtime and training at night. So I never missed days. I never took time off. And even though I didn't have a coach and I didn't have a training group to keep me accountable, I certainly respected my sport as, being the CEO, the employer, the employee, the marketing manager, and, no one else was going to get the work done for you. You'd have to do it yourself. So that's probably where my career blossomed, just because of the fact that I had that honesty and accountability for it.
Lee, your origin story, grew up in Geelong, and I believe you followed your father into running, who was running at that stage for weight loss and fitness. So can you take us through the origin story that leads into what was the start of your professional career?
We, like probably most people, grew up during the era of Robert De Castella, and Deke was in fire in sort of 81, 83, and the Olympics in 84. And my father was on a bit of a fitness campaign to lose weight, like he was smoking and drinking. And, him and a neighbour decided to get into some running. And, it just became then a little bit of a lifestyle choice. And so I would join my dad, running 3 kilometres with him, which is how far it was around the estate. My brother would come, and then we started to learn about fun runs, and we'd go to fun runs. And there was it was just a great introduction to just a really pure and innocent sport. And, I still played other sports. I was playing football and like cricket and all these other things. But I think running just, to be able to do it with your dad, it's something that, you can run with anyone. It doesn't discriminate. I got into it for the right reasons. I really wasn't that talented. If we raced locally, I wouldn't win. And obviously I didn't even know anything about state championships nor national championships. So running just had innocence about it. But each year I got better. I went from being my high school champion to like being the Geelong region champion to, then being the Vic country champion to then a state champion to a national champion when I turned 18. So I think over that time, because I didn't have a coach and I was just running with my dad and I was running for fun, there was no pressure. I wasn't training, intensely. I wasn't on the track. I wasn't an elite athlete that, all of a sudden there was this Olympic hopes pinned onto them that, usually with pressure and stress, you see athletes with potential and ability break down. So I was obviously just an unknown. And then before you know it, I'm 18. I'm already running 160 kilometres a week, and I've been doing that since I was 16. And, my pathway was obviously very different from most people. And I think that was what added and helped me have the long career that I had, because I wasn't burnt out. I hadn't had a lot of injuries, and my introduction to running was based purely on enjoyment and fun, as opposed to that I had a talent and someone had ID'd it, and I had coaches, and I was going to be an Olympic prospect.
And Lee, I mean, obviously, it's interesting to hear you say that you weren't cherry picked through your teenage years to be the next Olympic hopeful. You were running for the enjoyment. You were getting some solid work logged through your natural work ethic and the enjoyment of the sport, and void of those pressures. I mean, if we fast forward some of those formative years to what was, is one of the hallmarks of your great career, and that's breaking Ron Clarke's 33-year national record here in Australia for 5,000 metres on the track. What was life like in 99, leading into that? You'd already been to the Com Games a year prior. So how did you make that transition from just enjoying the sport, all of a sudden getting a national title? How did you navigate those years, Lee? Was that tricky? Did you feel the pressure, or were you still just at that point, even before breaking Ron's record, running for enjoyment?
Yeah, I mean, prior to that, 94, 95, I'd had a scholarship opportunity to a junior college in Texas. So when I was 18 and I won the National Schoolboys Championship, I got an offer to go to a junior college, which, back then I knew nothing about it. I just assumed that, everything was like Beverly Hills 90210 with beaches and, good-looking women. And I went over to the US having no idea how big the world was. And I went from being like a big fish in a small pond to all of a sudden being a very, very tiny fish in a huge ocean. And, in the collegiate system, you run against a lot of Africans and, South Americans and, and obviously American athletes and Europeans. And, I remember just getting my butt kicked the first 2 weeks that I arrived. And I could tell my coach at the time was thinking that they had recruited a donkey. And I remember him sitting me down and just telling me about, the ability that he'd seen me in my training, and if I applied myself, I could actually, be a fairly decent runner. And, I ended up, being fairly successful under him. And, we got to race against a lot of universities that had a lot of Kenyan athletes. And, I certainly didn't look at Kenyan athletes with any fear. It was always a challenge, and I'd always finish in the top 2, 3, win an occasional race. And, I think, being in that environment and racing some of these great athletes, when I came back to Australia, I sort of already felt like I'd faced a baptism of fire. And, going through that process up to 99, I mean, again, I had to readjust because I'd be racing against guys such as Sean Crichton and Steve Moneghetti, who were unbelievably good athletes and had already been, on multiple teams. And, I just found that if I could put the same work in that I did when I was in Texas, and, if I applied the same mentality, that I'd eventually get there. And I was living in Ballarat at the time, and when I got off the plane, I moved straight to Ballarat to train with Steve Moneghetti. And I think within the first month that I was home, I sadly ended up in hospital getting assaulted one night, and ended up with a blood clot on the brain and a broken jaw and a shattered cheekbone, and that derailed 1995. But as I said, through 96 and 97 and 98, I just applied everything that I'd learned in my junior college. I had Steve Moneghetti to train with, and his rule of thumb was that, if you had 3 strikes against your name, you were out. And he trained at 8 in the morning and 5 at night. And So I learned very early, again, that, there's accountability to running, and not anyone's going to help you out or give you an opportunity. You've got to do it yourself. So training with Mona, not being injured, building, those 100-mile weeks into 110-mile weeks, all set the platform for what happened in '99. And I remember beating Mona for the first time at the Zatopek in '97, and that was just a huge opening for me, because training with Mona, I could beat Mona in training, but whenever I'd get to racing, I just couldn't translate my ability on the training track to the racing track. And I learned a lot from Mona on how he could train at like 90%, but then when he raced, he could race at 110%. And I know there's no such thing. You play a rule of 100%, but he could just tick off what needed to be done in training. But then when he got to a race, he could go just beyond himself and deliver something that, I used to think being younger was just not humanly possible and capable of. So I learned a lot about changing my psychology when it comes to racing. And I think, that's why I ended up getting the kudos that I got when it come to being, one of Australia's tough racers, because whenever I went out and raced, I just wanted people to bleed, and I was going to race as hard as I could. And if I didn't lose, I was going to lose because I got beaten by a better athlete on the day, and not because of the fact that I lost it by not sticking to a certain strategy. So those years were critical. And, breaking Clarke's record, I remember it like yesterday. And I was preparing for London Marathon. I'd been to Sydney 5 days earlier, and I did a 3K, and I ran 7:41, and I got beaten just by Lucas Kivkoski, who was the number 2 runner in the world at the time. And I certainly didn't go in there thinking I was going to run a fast time. I went into the race wanting to win, and I remember at 700 metres to go, I went to the lead, and just to be in a position of confidence and having faith in my ability, and just racing at 3,000 metres as hard as I could, that just gave me the confidence leading into the 5K. And I mean, I remember crossing the line, and Mona said to me, "I think you broke the Australian record." And I said to him, "What is it?" I had no idea what it was. The Australian record was 7:41.6, and I ran 7:41.78. But I knew that, in a heavy block training for London Marathon, I flew up there that day, raced that night. I just did it as a training workout, that I'd go close to breaking Clarke's record 5 days later. And the race played out exactly the same. Like we had Ben Mayo in the race, and he was like the number 4 runner in the world. Luke Kipkoski was there. Graham Hood did the pacemaking. And I just remember that we got into the race, and with 5 laps to go, I could tell the pace slowed, and I went to the lead to push the pace, and I went to the lead with 700 metres to go, and I crossed the line running 13:14, and honestly, I didn't really know what the splits were in the race. I just raced to win, and I didn't win. I got second, but just putting myself in that position to try and win was what gave me the Australian record in the time.
Yeah, and I mean, after 33 years, that's a significant achievement. Obviously, that must be one of your fondest. You mentioned training with Monas, Lee, a former guest of the Physical Performance Show, and in Ballarat, and growing up in the 90s myself as a junior triathlete in Grafton, I heard about the Ballarat squad, and you got snippets through the grapevine. This was all pre really the proliferation of the online world where information was at your fingertips. But Lee, were there any one or two really great stories of hard sessions or days that were just super tough through those years training with Monas at Ballarat?
Oh, look, Mona was just he brought out the best in me. He was competitive. The stories of, where, you'll have run a certain amount of kilometres for the week, and, we'd always do Sunday would be day 1 and Saturday would be day 7. And, you'd be sitting there that night, and I'd go, "Oh, Mona, I've got you. I've run 207 kilometres for the week, to your 205. And then I'd find out Sunday morning that before midnight he'd gone out and done an extra 4 kilometres just so that he could have 208 as opposed to my 207. The things that he did, he had this, he was like a fox. He was very cunning and mischievous. I mean, from the exterior looking at him, you'd look at this nice, humble guy, but deep down, he was an animal. And I think the greatest story I have is in Townsville in 1997, and we were running up Castle Hill. And so I'd mapped out that we're going to run up Castle Hill, which was, about a 10-minute hill climb, and then I found about 20 minutes of hill sprints that we were going to do, and I'd finish on the track with a flat-out 400. So we did the 2K hill climb, and we then did the 20 minutes of hills, and we got back to the track, and I finished off with my 400, and we're doing a cool down, and there was like Julian Painter, Rod DeHuyden, Sean Quilty, and I don't know who asked me the question, but someone said, "How did the workout go?" And I said, "Oh, look, it was good. It was easy. It wasn't as hard as what I thought." And Mona turned around and said to me, and he goes, "Well, let's go again." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Well, come on, if it wasn't easy, let's go again." And I just started laughing. I was like, "Yeah, whatever, Mona." And we're in the middle of a cool down, and we got to this junction where if you went straight, you actually had to keep going up Castle Hill. But if you turned right, it took us back to the marina, which is where we were staying. And so as we get towards the intersection, Mona's like 30, 40 metres in front of me, and he just keeps going straight. And I started laughing, going, "Yeah, come on, don't be a hero. Yeah, what are you doing?" And one of the guys said to me, "He's not coming back." And I was like, "No." So I took off, and I ran as hard as I could, and I got to the top, and I started screaming at him. I'm like, "Well, you're insane. You're an idiot. Like, why are you doing that?" And he just started laughing. And he goes, "Well, we both got something extra out of it." And what was amazing about that was about 6 weeks later, Mona won he won a bronze medal at the World Championships in 1997. And on that same day, I won the City to Surf. And they were the little things that you've got to be a bit insane. And when someone's throwing down a challenge, to then actually accept it and just see two men going toe-to-toe in these workouts and doing these stupid things, I think was the beauty of what made our relationship great. But it also made when we raced each other entertaining, because both of us were always going to be pushing each other to the end. None of us were giving each other any slack. There were no handouts. Like Mona never gave me a victory and I never gave him a victory. And when we crossed the line, we just had this mutual respect for each other that we were to take each other to the ends of the earth and make each other bleed to get the best out of ourselves. And so it's stories like that I miss today. I absolutely love. And, I try to get my athletes to sort of draw a little snippet of that, maybe not be as crazy as I was, but just to realise that there is a level of crazy that you need in order to be successful. And they were certainly the things that I just have complete admiration and respect for Mona in being able to get that out of me.
Well, Lee, it's obviously mutual. The running world knows that, but when I asked Steve who's someone that he thought would be good to feature on the show would be, you obviously said yourself that was last year. So moving into your Olympic campaigns, Lee, I mean, leading into the Sydney Olympic Games 2000 here in Australia, the nation was alight with aspirations and expectations of athletes. You were having success on the track, having beaten broken Ron Clarke's record, victory in the City to Surf, etc. And then you made a decision to go into the marathon. How old were you at that point chronologically, Lee? And what was the decision? Was it hard to let go of some of the track stuff to focus on the marathon at that point, leading into 2000?
No, not at all. I mean, I wanted to be a marathoner when I was 12 years of age. I grew up with Rob DiCostella, and, I was going to run one at 16 until a family friend told my dad that there would be damaging effects if I did do it. So for me, running track was just a means to an end until I was old enough and ready enough to run the marathon. So, I ran 2:11 on debut. I ran London Marathon in 99, and I remember we went through the first half in 66 minutes, and it felt like we were walking. Like I'm sitting there with world record holders and Olympic champions, and I ran the second half in 65, and like I said, I ran 2:11. So I always knew I was going to be a marathoner, and I felt that I'd be a better marathoner than track runner, despite obviously the arguments that some people have had with me. But the most important thing is that even though I had success on the track, it wasn't my love. My love was marathon and my love was cross country. And I've always said that I would take lesser results in the marathon to do what I loved and greater results on the track for something that I didn't have the complete passion and love for. So I have no regrets. And obviously Sydney was a vacuum, and I really wish that the Olympics had probably been in another country for my first Olympics as opposed to a home Olympics, because I was just a bit green behind the ears. I didn't really understand the magnitude and how big it was, and I think I just got caught up in it being a home Olympics. And I was training 3 times a day. I was just training like a complete idiot, and I wanted to obviously go into this Olympics, and particularly being a home Olympics, I wanted to medal. And if I couldn't medal, I wanted to be in the top 10. And I trained unbelievably hard, but sadly, around the end of 1999 and going into 2000, I developed a stress fracture in my femur, and I had to miss 8 weeks, and then I only had 6 weeks to come up for the trials. And it was a very tough process to, all of a sudden see potentially your Olympic dream, something that you had been working for your whole life, maybe slip away. So I got through the stress fracture. I had put 6 weeks of training together. I went and ran the Olympic trials, and I qualified at the Olympic trials. I don't know how, but I did. And again, it's just drawing on all that stupid stuff I did with Mona, that I think when you're in that situation of struggling, you've got to draw on some form of strength. And if you haven't done those things, then it's hard to draw on it. And once I qualified for the Olympics, I certainly didn't respect the injury that I had, and all I wanted to do was just get back into training. And so I did. I just trained. Everything was about the Olympics, morning, noon, and night. That's what it was about. And I went into the Sydney Olympics hopeful of winning a medal, and I was fourth at halfway, and there was only a pack of 11 of us, and the first half of the race was amazing. I felt great. I just was just really excited about getting into the second half and knowing that it was a fairly hilly second half and using my strength. But as we sort of were running through the city centre, down through town before we went up over the Glebe Island Bridge, I just felt a little bit of a pop in my stomach, and then it just started to get worse and worse. And then I found out a few weeks after the Olympics that I'd torn my rectus abdominis. But it was the tale of two stories, where I went from feeling like $1 million in the first half to then feeling just like a bucket of doo-doo in the second half. And I faded back to 66th, and I was vomiting blood at some stage at maybe 30 or 34 kilometres. And it was just sheer torture and agony. I think the sheer torture and agony was just more the fact that I was just embarrassed that it was a home Olympics. It was in front of family and friends, and obviously my countrymen and women, and to go into the stadium, like still to this day, I've never seen the race. I don't really remember finishing in the stadium, but I know I was one of the last to finish because there was a cut-off at 2.5 hours. And I got in, and as I walked through the finish line, there was Deke and there was Mona. There was Bruce McAvaney and Rod Hyden. We obviously have some traditions with the Olympics where, all our athletes will wait for the last person to come in. And I just started crying because at that stage I had no idea what was wrong with me, and I sort of navigated my way through the media scrum, and I found a door and I pushed my way out through the door, and it ended up taking me outside the stadium, and then I couldn't get back in, and I didn't have my credentials, or I didn't have anything. And so I started walking back to the village, which was about 2 kilometres away, and I remember getting back to the village and there's no one there. Everyone's at the closing ceremony. Everyone's, in the stadium, and it was just so somber and just like quiet. And I remember getting back to the village, and then the security guard wouldn't let me in because I didn't have my accreditation. I started crying, and anyway, they let me in, and I remember going back to my room, which we stayed way at the back of the village, and I got into my room, and I just, for the next 2 hours, had my head between my legs, just struggling to come to terms with what had happened. And I think that moment for me probably scarred the rest of my running career, because my next 2 Olympics were all set up with the failure that I felt from the Sydney Olympics. And I just put way too much pressure on myself. I lost the innocence of what I'd had throughout my youth and through my junior collegiate career. And then during that time I was training with Mona, where I started to overthink and overanalyze and psychoanalyze. And I certainly got some great performances out during the rest of my running career, but I certainly don't think I ran with the same purity that I'd had prior to that.
Lee, so much there. What was, firstly, as a physiotherapist of 12 years, and working largely with the running population, I don't think in my recollection I've ever seen or even heard of anyone. Certainly, I've heard of people having rectus abdominis strains, but that is just obviously an indication as to how much that femoral stress injury that you had, obviously was creating compensatory challenges for you, and to push through that. I mean, that's devastating at a home Olympics. But what was the first thing? I know you're super close, with your father, and obviously Monas and Deeks. What were the first words that the gentleman shared with you when they got to you after Sydney, the marathon?
To be honest, I can't remember. It was just such a blur. I mean, it was probably, well done. I honestly, I just wanted to get out of there. Like I said, I wouldn't be able to tell you what was said. It certainly, all I wanted to do was just get out of there and just, find a deep dark hole and just lay in it until I could work out exactly what had happened. And as I know, you get one shot at these things, and I blew my chance. And to be honest, I wouldn't be able to tell you what was said and what conversation I had.
Yeah, no, look, fine. Lee, moving into Athens, obviously, there's a lot of, timeline we're leaving out here to jump 4-year cycle. But Athens 2004, I know that you put some very solid work into that, in an attempt to, in some ways make amends to your own, disappointment with Sydney. And then how did Athens play out for you? And then that leads us over into Beijing, obviously 2008.
Look, Athens, I was on a mission to run every day. I was running roughly 240, 250 kilometres a week. I ran for 1,000 days without a day off. Athens, I was driven by the demons of Sydney, and all I wanted to do was make amends and, prove to people that I was a good athlete and prove that I could be competitive with the best athletes in the world. And, I went and did a stint in Boulder and then a stint in St. Moritz, and then I went straight into the heat in Italy, getting ready for Athens. And, cut a long story short, I just cooked myself. And when the gun went off, I was like a car that had 5 gears, but only 4 were working, and I couldn't respond to surges. I couldn't respond to, what was going on in the race. And, I ran London Marathon earlier that year and ran 2:09 in horrendous conditions. I was on 2:06 pace for the majority of the race. I went through halfway in 63:10, and, I was running against Evans Ruto and Stefano Baldini. And, I came out of London, 5 months earlier, knowing that I could finish in the top 10. And I wasn't racing anyone any different or any better going into Athens that wasn't there at London. But I just trained too hard. I didn't respect rest. I didn't really factor, going from a hard training stint at altitude to a hard training stint in the heat, where I just wasn't giving my body a chance to recover. And, I went into that and, I ran okay. I was 28th, but I just couldn't, the first 5 kilometres I was maxed out, and that was as fast as I was going to run. And, for me, it was just trying to hang in there and just allowing the moment of that event to get to me and to just overanalyze it. I mean, it's just a race. It really is. And I should have went into that race with the same attitude I had at London and the same attitude I had when I broke Clarke's record. But unfortunately, because of, what we put the pedestal of the Olympics on and what had happened at Sydney, I just put way too much pressure into it, and I didn't perform, and I certainly didn't live up to my ability.
You're listening to 3 times Australian Olympic marathon representative and former 5,000 metre Australian record holder Lee Troop share the highs, lows and learnings of his remarkable career. Support for today's show comes from the Gold Coast Marathon. Like the physical performance show, the Gold Coast Marathon encourages runners of all ages and abilities to push their boundaries and strive to complete a personal challenge. Scene of Lee Troop's famous 2006 Australian Marathon Championship winning run, the Gold Coast Marathon is held annually on the first weekend in July and is a must-do event for any budding athlete, weekend warrior or family looking for a challenge to complete together. Run for the good times at the Gold Coast Marathon. Visit goldcoastmarathon.com.au. Support for today's show also comes from Pogo Physio. We exist to help you perform at your physical best following injury. We want everyone who walks through our doors to cross their physio finish line. That's where we high-five you and celebrate the fact that you're back to your physical best. We do this through traditional session-to-session appointments, as well as some industry-first models of care, including our unique 2, 6 and 12-week fixed-fee, unlimited access finish line programs, which include unlimited hands-on therapies and exercise rehabilitation, including clinical Pilates and use of state-of-the-art equipment such as the Alta G anti-gravity treadmill. In addition to finish line programs and session-to-session care, clients can also benefit from our monthly wellness booster packs, which include remedial massage, physiotherapy, clinical Pilates, and more, starting at a low $195 per month. To find out more about Pogo Physio's services, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. For now, let's jump back to Lee Troop. And Lee, I mean, so much out of that in terms of learnings, modifying training, appreciating the power of rest, as you hinted to. Beijing 2008, another big Olympics, and from what I know, it was one of the first times you really hit the wall early in a marathon. How did that one play out?
Yeah, so I decided, having had what I did at Athens, where I just trained so hard, that I'd use sports science leading into Beijing. And so I was using a heat chamber, but I was also sleeping in an altitude tent. And, I was a little bit like a rat in a cage, so to speak, in that, everything was just being micromanaged with lactates and salt levels. And, I'd get up at 6 and drive to Melbourne to use the VIS heat chamber. And I'd, jump in a car and I'd go up to Ballarat and I'd use their heat chamber. And I'd come back home, and in my living room was the altitude tent that I'd set up at 9,000 feet, sleep 9 hours at 9,000 feet. And so, everything was going along fantastically well, I thought, in my preparation, and I was really looking forward to getting to Beijing and running well. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen. Like, I remember we took off, and I was like 2:57 through the first K, and I was like towards the end of the race, and I looked up, and Wanjuri was gone. And anyway, I hit the wall at 17 kilometres. I don't know why, but again, I probably think, looking back on things, that Beijing was probably the process that I didn't enjoy, because I was doing things that I probably let too many people have influence on me in saying that, look, we should do this and we can balance that out. I mean, I'm an old school guy. I just like to train hard. I'm not really into modern science and technologies. And but here I was putting so much time and effort into it. And those that know me know that I'm an extrovert, and, I need to be able to do things. I need to get out. I need to be a little bit of a free spirit. So once I sort of lock myself down in those situations, I think I go against my own personality, and it just backfired, I feel. And, all the Olympics, I made sure that I didn't drink any alcohol for the whole year, that I was getting my rest, that, I was living like a monk, primarily because I wanted to not have any excuses if the race went pear-shaped, that I could just turn around and say that, I did everything right and everything in my power. I'd hate to have, maybe 3 weeks before a race, gone out and had a few beers and, slipped off a street corner because I was a bit inebriated. So I always wanted to make sure that I did everything right. And, I think, honestly, with my personality, there wouldn't have been anything wrong with having a couple of beers, 3 weeks before a race. I mean, when I ran Lake Biwa marathon in 2003, I had a beer the night before the race, and I had a pizza and I had some pasta, and I was just relaxed. I felt like having a beer. And I remember Mona saying to me, "What are you doing?" And I just said, "I feel like a beer." And I had a beer, and I went out the next day and ran 2:09. So I just think that I certainly screwed up in my preparations for the Olympics, more from a mental side of things rather than a physical side of things. I think the physical side of things could have balanced out had I been a little bit more balanced mentally. But it's come, it's gone. I don't have any hesitations in saying that I had 3 Olympic Games that I personally feel like that I choked at. And you live and learn, and I think that's what makes me a good coach at the moment, is I take these experiences and I'm honest with it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and I try to make my athletes know that I know what worked, and I want them to stick with that, and I also know what didn't work. And if we can stay away from that, then I'm hopefully saving them some of the heartache that I went through.
And Lee, I mean, it wasn't all bad days for your marathoning career. You had some great city marathons, Lee. I mean, running 2:10:31 in 2007 in Berlin, an Olympic A qualifier, and then again 2017, I believe it was 2013, I think it was, in Boston, I think, where you ran 2:17 at age 40. Is that right?
Yep. I mean, obviously, my city careers were pretty good. You know, like I ran 2.9 a couple of times, 2.10 a couple of times, 2.11 a couple of times. So I was consistent, you know, at that 2.9, 2.11 phase. But, you know, you can control the variables of a city race. Like, you know exactly what the weather's going to be. You can train to the course. You know, you got your drink stations set up, and, you know, like you can go and do your training stint. You know, obviously with championships, things change because, you know, you have to be at team camps, and, you know, you're not sure what the weather's going to be like. You know, there's no pacemaker, so you don't know what the racing is going to be like. And, you know, one thing I wish I had a bit more racing of, particularly in Australia, was just more championship racing where, you know, at any given time things happen and you've got to be prepared for things not to go according to plan. Whereas with city marathons, everything goes to script, and I got that dialed in. I just didn't get championship stuff dialed in because I didn't do enough of it, and I think in Australia we don't have enough of it. So, you know, I mean, again, you know, we live and learn, and I accept it. You know, I'm not disappointed. I know we can't go back in time, but you know, these are the things that you as you move along, you know, to try and be a better version of yourself, you just got to be honest with it. And, you know, Boston, you know, obviously in 2013, I ran a fantastic race. I think I was 11th overall. And I remember the conditions were terrible. It was a howling headwind. And, you know, I remember doing that race, and then unfortunately we got caught up in the Boston bombings. And, you know, I think, you know, that was probably the final piece for me as far as, you know, an athlete and enjoying sport that changed things completely. And, you know, I went another 2 years, and obviously retired at the end of 2014 at New York. By that stage, though, running certainly just wasn't once what it was.
And I mean, how did that change your view on the significance of running, seeing the Boston community, you know, regroup, come back the following year after that tragedy? And, you know, did it change you and your view of running, Boston, the year that you got caught up in the bombings, and how?
Yeah, it did. I mean, you know, I tell the story, you know, of the little boy that obviously lost his life, where his father come around the corner to stop, and, you know, he gave his wife and daughter and son a kiss, and, you know, he went through the finish line, and, you know, he had no idea that would be the last time that he saw his family. And, you know, someone that, you know, is a family person and goes to races with their family and has run down the finishing chute with their kids, that one moment in time just completely changed me forever, just because of the fact, you know, I think about the innocence and, you know, what it means to people and communities, and, you know, how this is something that we shouldn't discriminate. You know, you have people running to lose weight, you have people running for charities, you have elite athletes, you have people running for health reasons. And, you know, to have that moment taken away like that, it just... Like it did. I mean, I had, you know, 2 or 3 weeks of just not sleeping and watching everything, and, you know, it just you know, and then going to events now, like the heightened level of security and what you got to go through, and, you know, it's a different world, and, you know, it's certainly not as enjoyable as it once was. And, you know, I was there with Deke at the time, and, you know, like our hotel was locked down, so that ended up becoming the command center for the police and the army and the Secret Service and everyone. And so I probably saw more on that night than I should have. And, you know, we heard stories, and, you know, some of them were true, some of them weren't. But, I mean, obviously the first responders weren't to know what was true and what wasn't. So we were on a knife's edge, you know, the whole night in the hotel. And, you know, there were reports that there were packages found around the hotel. And, I mean, I guess we're never going to know exactly, you know, what happened and what has been covered up and how many lives were saved by the active first responders. But, you know, like for me, it just it shook me up. And as I said, just that one incident just, you know, certainly changed me. And as I said, I think, you know, the next couple of years, you know, I sort of kept hanging in there. But I went back to Boston the following year, and I wasn't fit, and I got caught up in the emotion of, you know, Boston strong and wanting to run for Boston, and I ended up getting a blood clot on my lung and ended up in hospital for 3 months. So I lost 10% of my lung from that, which then made me realise that, you know, I was getting old, I was getting banged up, and it was time to hang the shoes up. And so I decided to do Gold Coast as my last race, and then finished it off with New York, which I'd never done and had always wanted to do. And I closed the book at the end of New York Marathon in 2014.
And Lee, on the Gold Coast, I was mentioning to one of my physio patients yesterday that I was speaking with you today, and he's a big fan of running and Australian distance running, and he spent some time detailing your final Gold Coast Marathon in 2014, of which you've been a victor of the Gold Coast Marathon on the honour roll prior to that. And his name's Wayne. And Lee, I'm going to try and play a clip from Wayne where he describes what he believes is one of the gutsiest runs that probably didn't get enough attention. So I'm just going to press play on a clip here. Lee?
Hi, Brad. During our physio sessions, we've been talking about some of the great Aussie race finishes. A special one, which I always remember, was Troopy's last 12K in the 2014 Gold Coast Marathon. It didn't involve a podium finish, but to me, his physical effort was equal to anything I've ever seen. It started when my wife and I watched the runners come past at the 2K mark, and I was paying special attention to Lee. I was told it was going to be his last marathon, and I wanted to see him run. By memory, he flew past us in the second group of runners looking strong. We then went and had a coffee, and I proceeded to watch his performance on my iPhone. He was posting a series of 16-minute 5K splits, and then we decided to return on the course and positioned ourselves around the 30K mark. I was so disappointed for him when I didn't see him pass in the front groups. He'd fallen way back. I saw on my phone that he had dropped back to a 20-plus minute split between 25 to 30K. He was now running over 4-minute Ks, and you would think he was gone. From the 30K mark onwards, however, the crowd saw Troopy and I think sensed his pain. They really got behind him and cheered him on. He ended up running the last two 5K splits in 17 minutes and had picked his pace up to a consistent 17 kilometres an hour over those last 12 kilometres. Brad, to hang on like that for a full 12 kilometres blew my mind away. I don't think many people realise what he did that day and how gutsy a run it was. I would love you to ask Troopy about that marathon and tell him he's a great Aussie champion.
So Troopy, you remember that run?
Yeah, I do. And, obviously it was my last one. And, I'd had the issues with the blood clot, as I'd said, after Boston. So I was coming in, not in the best of shape. And I'd lost 10% of my lung as a result of the blood clot. So, my training was hampered. But, knowing that it was my last one, I wanted to obviously run and race as well as I could. And, I felt fairly good through the first sort of 10 kilometres. And then all of a sudden I started to feel like the pace was starting to catch up. And, I had that rough patch sort of going through 20 to, about 25K going through to about 35K. But certainly the crowd was amazing. And, I just kept saying to myself that this is the last race. This is the last race. This is the last time you've got to hurt. This is, I just kept trying to, will myself on. And I just felt that once, I was getting closer towards the finish line that, the pain wasn't going to last forever. I could certainly forget about it after a few beers once I crossed the finish line. But, I think, that race is obviously just reflective of how I ran. And, there are unbelievable races in my career, and there are also some bad races on my career sheet. But, every race I ran with 100% conviction to get the best out of myself and to not leave the course, knowing that I had something left or I didn't perform to my best. And, sadly that, it's a bad thing to have. I mean, I did that at Gold Coast last year, running in honour of my dad, where I retired. I'd been retired for 2.5 years. I hadn't really done much running, and I tried to get what running done that I could. And I went into that race not really fit. I went out there to try and run 2:20, 2:25, and the wheels come off after about 10K. And, to the point where I thought I was having a heart attack at about 27 kilometres and had to ask the paramedics if I was. And, I was reduced to a walk and a shuffle, and, I got to 39 kilometres, and even though I had not 1 ounce of energy left in me, I forced myself to finish off that last 3 kilometres and make sure that regardless of how slow I was running, I finished it off. So, I guess regardless of the level of fitness, when you stand on the start line, you've got to give 100%. And I hope that people that have followed my career and seen it, know that, regardless of whether I won or whether I ran a 3:09 marathon, that I gave everything I had, and that was as good as it got on the day.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there, coming back out of retirement to run the marathon in honour of your dad, who had just overcome, brain cancer, Joe. With the Gold Coast Marathon 2018 coming up, obviously your work in coaching this this new chapter in your running life, your running career, which you've been at for some time with the Boulder Track Club. But excitingly, I believe one of your charges, Laura Thwaite, may be making an appearance on the Gold Coast in 2018.
Yeah, I mean, she's wanted to come to Australia, ever since I started coaching her, and she's unfortunately getting over osteitis pubis, and so we're trying to get on top of that. But if depending on what marathon she runs, which could be Berlin or Chicago, maybe in the fall, she wants to. Excuse me. She wants to run a half. So I said to her that, how would she feel about the Gold Coast half? And, hopefully we're going to get her back racing next month. And if everything goes according to plan, I'd love for her to come out to the Gold Coast, see, what Australia is, meet the great Aussie icons that I talk about regularly with Deke and Mona, and and then she's got a great racing history with Lisa Waitman and Jess Trengrove, who she raced against at London Marathon last year, where she ran 2:25, and just give her a bit of exposure of my country and the people that I know, and just show her how big the world is, but also just a piece of what is important to me. So she's excited about it if we can keep her healthy, and I'm actually going to race the half marathon against her. So I've been back running on her comeback, so I've been with her every day over the last 4 months, and I'm going to race with her in the races that we've picked, and to be honest, it'll be a borderline decision as to whether she's going to get the chocolates or whether I'll get the chocolates. But I'm certainly I'm enjoying actually coming out of retirement to train with her and race with her, because she is just such a version of me as far as that animalistic attitude, and she pushes herself through pain, and she wants to beat me. She's an animal, and the things I talked about with Mona and some of the stupid things we do, they're the things that I get to do with her. We were running Sunday, for example, and there happened to be a guy in tights that was wearing 7-inch basketball shorts over his tights, and I turned around and said, I can't run behind a guy that looks like that. And so we both took off, and we started clicking off 6-minute mile pace, and those little things just remind me of what my life was like 20 years ago. And regardless of the fact that she's a female, I mean, to me, I don't look at her any different than if she was a guy. I mean, when you're a competitor, you're a competitor, and so I step out in training, and I certainly, at 45 years of age, give the best version of myself to beat her. And her at 29 years of age, she does exactly the same thing, where she's out there to take my scalp as well. So it's just good to, like I said, at this point in my life, be able to be back running and enjoying it and having fun. And everyone keeps asking when I'm going to race, because if I'm going to put in this amount of training and be as fit as what I am, I should race. But I really have no personal goals to get back out there and race on my own. I just see this as just a different challenge and something that excites me a lot more.
You're listening to Lee Troop, Australian marathon representative at 3 Olympic Games, 2000, 2004 and 2008, and former 5,000 metre Australian record holder. Share the highs, lows and learnings of his career. If you missed last week's episode featuring myself reflecting on the Physical Performance Show and the learnings that we have taken in bringing 100 episodes to air, it was a bit of a celebration episode, and we called into the recording Alastair Day, who featured way back in 2016 on episode 1 of the Physical Performance Show. Alastair Day, 2015-16 Nutrigrain Ironman Series champion and 4 times Coolangatta Gold Ironman champion. Joining us was also Matt Morby from Pogo Physio. We had a great 3-way discussion around all things performance. And as a possible first in the world of podcasting, we had a mid-recording drug testing from Asada, who came to Seacat Alley for in-season testing. So we had a bit of a pause and a late night at the practice recording that one. So if you missed it, jump back over. It was a whole lot of fun. Episode 100 of the Physical Performance Show. To tune into the full episode and explore the archives of the Physical Performance Show, be sure to jump over to pogophysio.com.au or simply peruse the archives on your favourite podcast player. Now let's jump back to Lee Troop. Lee, as a statesman of the sport, I mean, we've featured Moneghetti in the past, Kip Legat, Bernard, and, you know, I was fascinated in how, as aging runners, of which anyone that's listening in, we're all maturing with the clock. How do you make peace with that sort of progression in your career, where whether you're running for fun or whether you're pushing yourself or running alongside Laura, that, you know, your times won't necessarily be getting faster, they'll be going the other direction. How do you make peace with that? Any advice for listeners on how to navigate that, you know, that tipping point?
No, I think it's a personal thing. And like for me, you know, I talked about Boston being a little bit of a game changer. And then I also talked about the fact that I got a blood clot, which, you know, I'm never going to be 100% healthy again. You know, but then I've also got a young family, and, you know, being an athlete's selfish. You know, you've got to get massage, physical therapy, you've got to rest, you've got to train, you know, twice a day. And, you know, I just got to a point where I had a good career. I probably went a few years longer than I should have. But, you know, again, I said it's personal, and you as an athlete have to make that decision. And I certainly, when I made that decision, didn't have any regrets, and I still don't. And, you know, like I said, just life's a little bit different for me at the moment. And I coach athletes. I want to go to races actually being a coach. I don't want to go to races where I'm racing and I'm focused on my own race, because I'm doing them an injustice. And they've put their faith in me to make them better, and I need to respect that and honour that. And, you know, I take that role unbelievably serious. So again, everyone's different in what they choose to do and how they choose to do it, but they were my reasons for walking away and retiring. And, you know, like I said, I'm quite comfortable with it. I mean, do I miss it? Absolutely. I mean, do I wish I could wind the clock back 20 years ago? Absolutely. I mean, they were, you know, the best parts of my life and the things that I loved the most and the things that brought me like the greatest joy. But you've also got to be realistic and realise sometimes that you just got to move into the next phase. And, you know, that's where I went, and I certainly don't have any regrets with where I am now. And luckily, still being connected to the sport, I still get to live a little bit of my dream through my athletes, which is very cool and very unique. And I look forward to, you know, trying to get one of my athletes to the Olympics in 2020. And, you know, it's a motivating factor for me to make sure that, you know, I give my all so that they don't have any regrets that I let them down or I couldn't deliver on my end. So, like I said, different phase, but I certainly love it.
And Lee, the Boulder Track Club, you know, the founder of that, it's been thriving from my knowledge, just growing rapidly, attracting runners of all levels. I know your passion extends beyond the elite ranks to, you know, age group runners, people losing weight, the whole lot. What was the catalyst for the Boulder Track Club, Lee, and what's the future look like for BTC?
Look, you know, when I came here, we didn't have a setup like what we have today. And, you know, in Boulder, you have like just professional athletes in their own groups, or you have recreational runners in their groups, and the two never mixed, which anywhere around the world, like it does, like you see the club systems in Australia and the club systems in UK and the club systems in New Zealand. So I wanted to change a little bit of that elitist structure and have a club that had elite athletes, that had development athletes, who had everyday runners, had a youth program. And, you know, we're over 300 members. We're made up of like Mountain Ultra Trail and all the other groups, like I said, and people come from, you know, far and wide to be a part of the club. We have international members, we've got national members, we've got local members. And, you know, it's been awesome to see how many people have been able to embrace it. And, yeah, unfortunately, the club is going through a bit of a tough time at the moment. One of my good athletes took his life on Saturday night, and you know, we have a memorial for him in about 40 minutes' time. And, you know, just to see the members of the club, you know, to rally at this time around me and around my team, and, you know, it's just amazing to have a community within a community. And it means a lot to me that everyone here feels valued and important and has everyone's back. So, you know, that was something that wasn't here when I came here nearly 9 years ago, and to see that grow. And, you know, it's not me. There are many other people that bought into my vision. You know, I was probably the crazy one that come up with the idea at the time, but other people brought into my vision, and other people worked with me to make it become a reality. So it's just great to see. And, you know, my kids are involved in the club. You know, my wife's involved in the club. I coach in the club. We're well known internationally, and it's certainly something that has brought me a lot of joy. And, this is not a paid position for me. I've purely done this just because I'm passionate about the sport and passionate about people of all shapes and sizes. So, again, tonight, as we come together, it's just great that, we're a community club that's a family club, and we're going to have other people from other clubs that will come and join us tonight. And it's just, like I said, it's something that I'm very proud of, that we were able to achieve and do in an environment that really wasn't that accepting to it when we first started.
Leland, news to me, so condolences on that close loss for your squad and yourself personally. Lee, in terms of a performance round, some quick rapid fire questions. The highlight of coaching, the low light of coaching, what would that be? The
low light of coaching would be obviously what's happened to me in the last 72 hours. Just it's tough. Like you have a kid that puts his life in your hands to coach and to be the best athlete that they can be, and obviously it's a raw moment at this time, but over the last 72 hours I've questioned whether I feel equipped to coach. This is a different beast and something that I haven't been I've had to deal with. So that's probably the downside. You become more of a psychologist than you do a coach, and everyone's different. Everyone comes with different strengths and weaknesses, and as a coach you've got to treat everyone equal, and you've got to balance, and you can't obviously divulge private information. So I would say that's certainly a low light of coaching, and I do think that coaches are undervalued. I do feel that sometimes coaches are made as scapegoats for athletes. If things don't go well, the coach gets thrown under the bus, and I feel like that the amount of good that we do sometimes isn't as recognised, and we don't do it for that as well. Like, we do it for the athletes, but I said, just you see things, and then you're involved in things, and sometimes you just question whether you're the right person for the job. But changing tact and just going to the great things. Like, the great things is the connection. It's the relationships that you build. Like seeing your athletes dominate. It's not even just winning races. It's running PRs. It's them believing in themselves. Getting consistency and becoming better people. Like, I'm all about that. What we learn through our sport, we can take into other parts of our life. And I want my athletes to become better human beings, and to care about their communities, and to be conscientious of charities, and make a difference. We live in a world of violence and drugs and depression and fraud, and running is pure and it's simple, and we need to remind ourselves of that. So I want my athletes to value what they do, and just to have those relationships, and to go to those races, and to enjoy the moments that they have is probably the highlight that I take from it.
And Lee, I've heard you say, that you're a believer in people running with purity in their heart, and none more so than this current stage with the BTC. And mate, we're going to do a very abbreviated performance round to honour your commitment. Obviously, you've got shortly coming up there at your end. But just one more question in the performance round, Lee. That would be, who's the athlete that you admire most, and why?
The athlete.
Could be athletes.
Yeah, look, I like certainly Laura Thweet, who I coach. I have nothing but admiration and respect for her, and where she come from and where she is today. Deke and Mona, just they set the catalyst for me. And for countless other people. Sean Crichton, probably one of the most talented athletes we had. Craig Mottram, and then you look globally, and obviously there's no no one person, but people like Frank Shorter, obviously with the success that he had. I mean, Ron Clarke, how could you not put him up in that category? Steve Jones, the way he broke that world record. There are just countless people, and even outside of that, I draw inspiration from people like Nelson Mandela and Mark Platchies. Mark Platchies, won the World Championships in '93 for America. He had only got his citizenship about 2 weeks earlier. He was from South Africa, but couldn't run at the Olympics because of apartheid. And just seeing the people that they are, the difference that they've made, what they value as being important, are all the things that I model myself off, and I try to emulate. And obviously I want to be the best version of myself, but you've certainly got to have role models to give you a bit of an indication of what is the holy grail of where you want to get to. And even like you look at our women, Lisa Waitman, Susie Power as a junior athlete, the success that she had. Lisa Ondieki, and then Joan Benoit Samuelson. There's just not one person. There's just so many of them. And being a running junkie and running nerd, just being able to grow up idolizing a lot of them, but now knowing most of them and being friends with most of them, it's pretty awesome.
Lee, and the final two questions here. If you could boil everything you've learned through your athletic career, now your coaching career, successful coaching career, into one piece of advice for listeners looking to perform at their physical best, what would that be, Lee?
To enjoy it. I think when you enjoy a process, it becomes much more fulfilling and much more rewarding. Granted, sometimes when you have a plan, it might not come ahead and you have to take a step back and reevaluate and then refocus on what you need to do. But just enjoy the process. If you can enjoy the process, you've got every chance of being successful. And if you don't quite get to where you want to get to, at least you've enjoyed it along the way. And it just adds, another level of, that surface layer that you have. So just enjoy it.
Yeah, great. And Lee, lastly, you work with Marathon Guru. Listeners will tag this up in the show notes. But what would be your top 3 tips for first-time marathoners, Lee?
So set a goal, and that goal could be anything. It's, goals are personal, and, you just got to be able to work out exactly what your goal is going to be. Then the next part of that is preparation. So work out exactly what you feel you need to do to be best prepared. Now, some people work 80 hours a week and can probably only fit in 3 days of running. Others have family and, trying to sort their family in and around that, and some people have more time than they care to have, and they can fit in more training. So you have to put in the best preparation balanced on your lifestyle. And then the last one is execute. One thing that frustrates me is when people, have a goal and they have a plan, and then 2 weeks out, for whatever reason, they then decide that they're not going to do it because something quite didn't go right. Still execute it. At the end of the day, we don't always hit everything that we want out of the ballpark. But I think if you can stand on the start line knowing that you did everything right, you worked as well as you could, regardless of the circumstances, I think it makes people become more accountable to themselves, because let's face it, in life, things never always go according to plan. And we always have to put the best effort that we can in, regardless of the circumstances. So, I'd like to see people, even if things haven't gone right, still stand on the start line. If their goal was to run 3:10, but the last month or whatever it all fell apart, and it's more likely they're going to run 3:20, still do it, because I guarantee that extra 10 minutes of what they've got to go through, they'll learn more about themselves than had they gone out there and ran 3:10. If we learn more about those hardships than we do when things go perfectly well.
So powerful, the character building times. Lee, every guest of the show issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. What's Lee Troop, 3-time Australian Olympian, former 5,000 metre record holder, now coach of the Boulder Track Club's physical challenge of the week going to be?
To get out and at least walk or run for 20 minutes once.
Brilliant. So listeners, if you take on Lee's challenge, do jump over, tag Troopy in. Where can we find you on social, Lee?
I'm Run Troopy for Twitter, just Lee Troop on Facebook, and Lee Troop 73 on Instagram.
Troopy, it's a big day for you there in Boulder, so thank you very much for your time, your generosity, your vulnerability in sharing today. I know listeners, Lee, are going to get so much out of it.
No problems, Brad. Thanks for having me, and hello to everyone back home. Miss Australia a lot.
We'll be keeping an eye out for you come the Gold Coast Marathon 2018, Lee, in July.
Thanks, Brad.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show. I trust you enjoyed today's episode featuring Troopy, Lee Troop. If you did, then please let both Lee and myself know by tagging us in on social media with your feedback on what you enjoyed and learnt from today's episode. You'll find our social media handles along with all things mentioned today in the show notes over at pogophysio.com.au. If today was your first time tuning in to the Physical Performance Show, then a mighty welcome. If today was your 101st time tuning in, and I know that you're out there, then a massive thank you for your ongoing support. If you've enjoyed today's episode, then please consider tagging them in and spreading the love. Don't forget to also hit subscribe from within your favourite podcast player to ensure that each and every episode hits your earbuds each and every week. Lastly, if you've been enjoying the Physical Performance Show, then please consider leaving a rating review over on iTunes. It's really simple. iTunes have now opened up for reviews to be able to be done from your smartphone. Just search for the Physical Performance Show and rate away 1 star to 5 stars. A big thank you in particular this week to Fee308, and Fee308 rated the Physical Performance Show 5 stars, and I just had to read this one out. It made me laugh out loud when I got it. So here it is. A little bit funny, this one. What's up, beer dog? I guess that's me. I'm digging your views with all your sports boys and gals. Da marathoners are my fave because you're all tough mofos. I'll be puffing to your podcast while I train for my 2, 4, 5 G-Cam. Boom. Peace out. So, Fee308, thanks for the creative review and the 5 stars. And if you would like to do what Fee308 has done and leave a review, then please go for it. A huge thank you to the team who make the Physical Performance Show possible. That's Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, Matthew Olding on all things graphic design and imagery, and of course Daryl Misson on all things audio engineering. Of course, another big thank you to this week's sponsors of the show, and that is the Gold Coast Marathon. It's the first weekend in July, and it's all about good times. If you are yet to experience the Gold Coast Marathon weekend, then do not miss it. I have been competing in it for almost a decade, and it is one of my favourite events on the calendar. Such a great weekend, showcases the beautiful Gold Coast, and it's on a fast and flat course with an incredible atmosphere. So do whatever you need to do to get to the Gold Coast Marathon. Check it out, goldcoastmarathon.com.au. Podcasts are free to download, but they're not free to produce, so we really appreciate the Gold Coast Marathon support, as well as, of course, Pogo Physio. If you have any feedback for myself in terms of how to improve this show, then I'd love to know. My email address is b.beer@pogophysio.com.au. Feel free to shoot anything at all across to me there on an email, and I will devour that feedback. A new segment, and that's this week's Podsy. Podsy, what is it? That's where you pull out your phone, take a screenshot of the episode you're listening to and tag myself in at Brad_beer, and you can go into the draw to win a signed copy of You Can Run Pain Free. Thanks to those that have been taking podsies. It's been a whole lot of fun. Keep them coming. Lastly, if you are into running, then you can now pick up your copy of my running and jogging bestseller, You Can Run Pain Free. It's available over on Audible or iBooks. You Can Run Pain Free is also available, of course, in Kindle, digital versions, and of course, the good old trusty paperback versions via Amazon internationally and domestically, and also pogophysio.com.au. domestically as well. To say thank you for tuning in to the Physical Performance Show, you can head over to pogophysio.com.au and pick up your copy for 50% off the normal recommended retail price of $24.95. Simply put in the promo code POD 2018, all in lowercase letters, to receive 50% off. Coming up in next week's episode 102 of the Physical Performance Show, I share a conversation with you that I recently had with Craig Alexander, or Crowie, as he's affectionately known. We keep the endurance theme well and truly going. Crowie is a triathlon legend. He's been called the King of Kona, 5 times world triathlon champion and 3 times world Ironman champion, taking out victories on the Big Island of Hawaii in 2008, 2009 and 2011, taking out that famous victory in 2011 in setting the Hawaii Ironman World Championship course record. Crowie opens up around the highs, the lows, and the learnings of his career. He survives the performance round and he throws down the physical challenge for the week. All on next week's episode, so be sure to be tuning in to the Physical Performance Show. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.